When people talk about Team 10, Ino is always the one they overlook. Shikamaru is the genius, Choji's the powerhouse, and Ino, just a Sasuke and side glazer who got carried through every arc she was in. But when I actually sat down and studied her abilities, her role on that team, what she did in the Fourth War, the take completely fell apart. Because Ino isn't the weakest link on Team 10, she's the reason the team didn't break. And the fact that we've been sleeping on her for this long, that says less about Ino and more about how we've been trained to watch female characters in this show. This is her actual legacy. Let me show you. Cue my music.
This is what it's supposed to be. On the highway and I'm thinking that I love her.
と身体心の術これでおしまいよ
Let's start with the thing that actually gets dismissed the fastest. Ino's actual kit. Ino Yamanaka does not fight like a shinobi. She fights like a psychologist with a weapon. The mind-body switch technique is one of the most conceptually terrifying jutsus in the entire series. Ino projects her consciousness out of her own body and into the body of her target. She doesn't influence them. She doesn't slow them down. She becomes them. Their movements are hers. Their jutsus are hers. Whatever that shinobi is capable of, Ino can now do with their own body against their own allies. While in possession of an enemy's body, Ino can cause self-harm to that body. She can destroy the vessel from the inside as a tactical choice. Now yes, the technique has real drawbacks and it's important to be honest about them. When she projects her consciousness, her own body is left completely empty, vulnerable. If someone gets to her physical body while she's deployed, she's finished. And the technique itself, at least in its base form, is linear. It travels in a straight line, it's visible, and a skilled opponent can dodge it. So on paper, it looks like a high-risk, low-efficiency jutsu. But that assessment only holds if Ino is fighting alone, and Ino was never designed to fight alone, because the entire philosophy of the Ino Shikacho formation is built around turning individual weaknesses into collective strength. Shikamaru's shadow position immobilizes, Choji's raw physical power destroys, and Ino's mind-body switch becomes the scalpel that opens the operation. You saw it against reanimated Asuma Sarutobi, one of the most emotionally brutal fights in the entire series. Their former sensei, resurrected and forced to fight against his own students. And in that moment, it was Ino who locked him in place long enough for Choji to land the decisive blow. And you saw it again against Kinkaku and Ginkaku, two of the most catastrophically powerful opponents the allied shinobi forces faced in the early stages of the war. The Ino Shikacho formation used in combination allowed them to be restrained and sealed. Without Ino's piece on that formation, that fight goes completely differently. But here's the thing, if the mind-body switch is a scalpel, then the mind-body disturbance is a grenade. The mind-body disturbance doesn't require Ino to fully possess anyone. Instead, she fires her chakra into multiple targets simultaneously, hijacking their motor function and overriding their sense of friend and foe. Enemies under this technique don't freeze, they turn on each other. She doesn't stop them, she weaponizes them. And unlike the mind-body switch, Ino retains full consciousness while doing this. Her body isn't vacated, it doesn't require a straight line projection. It scales to a group combat in a way the original technique never could, and it fundamentally redefines what role Ino plays on a battlefield she's deployed to. She is not support in the passive sense of the world, she is active psychological disruption. There's a difference and it matters. Now we move to the ability that might actually have the highest impact of anything in Ino's kit, not in a single combat, but on the scale that the Fourth War operated on. The mind transmission technique is telepathically broadcasted. Ino can send thoughts, feelings, and information across an entire battlefield instantaneously to multiple recipients without a single word spoken out loud. In a world where information asymmetry wins wars, is the difference between a coordinated counterattack and a massacre. Ino's ability to function as a living communication network is not a niche skill, it is infrastructure. And when you combine this with her sensory perception, her ability to detect chakra signatures and map a battlefield before most shinobi even know engagement has started, what you have is a shinobi who processes the battlefield like a command center and distributes that intelligence in real time. Ino is also a trained medical ninja. During her time with Tsunade, Ino developed legitimate medical ninjutsu capabilities. The range of utility here is almost unfair when you say it out loud. So when people say Ino is just a support ninja, they are saying that psychological warfare doesn't count, that communication infrastructure doesn't count, that the ability to turn an enemy's formation against itself in real time doesn't count. And I want you to hold on to that thought, because everything we've just covered is only the foundation. Because what Ino can do is one thing, understanding what she actually did with it for her team and for an entire war is something else entirely.
第10番はイノシカチョウのコンビネーションでいくよ
What almost nobody talks about is what Ino does off the battlefield, because Team 10 is not just a formation, it's a relationship, and relationships have a load-bearing member, the person whose presence keeps everything structurally intact even when nobody watching them does it. On Team 10, that person is Ino. Shikamaru Nara is arguably the most tactically gifted shinobi of this generation. Choji Akumichi is a physical powerhouse, and Asuma Sarutobi needs no introduction. So where does Ino fit into that? Here's what Shikamaru actually is underneath the genius. He is profoundly, almost pathologically avoidant. Before Asuma's death forced him into a leadership role, he spent years treating everything, including his own potential, as an inconvenience, and Ino was the primary source of friction against that trait for years before anything else was. Then there is Choji. Choji Akamichi is one of the most genuinely lovable characters in the entire series. Kind, loyal, deeply empathetic. He's also someone who has spent most of his life carrying insecurity about his weight and his worth. Those two things are not unrelated, and the way the show handles it is complicated because Ino's relationship with that insecurity is not always comfortable to watch. She can be harsh about it, and on the surface that reads as bullying, but that framing misses the full picture, because when Choji's value is genuinely questioned, Ino is one of the first people to defend him with the kind of conviction that doesn't come from obligation. It comes from genuine investment in that person. That is the elder sister dynamic, and this is the thing about Ino that gets completely erased. She is the only socially active member of Team 10. Shikamaru is a self-described loner who finds most human interactions exhausting. Choji is warm but socially withdrawn. Ino, she is the member of Team 10 who's plugged into the emotional texture of everyday life that Shikamaru finds troublesome and Choji finds overwhelming. And whether it's her complicated rivalry with Sakura, her growing interest in Sai, that social energy pulls Team 10 into contact with the broader world in a way that neither Shikamaru nor Choji would naturally seek out. Now bring all of this back to the battlefield, because here's what Ino Shikacho formation actually is when you understand all this context. It is not three people who happen to have compatible jutsu. It is three people whose individual natures, Shikamaru's strategic detachment, Choji's physical power, and Ino's psychological disruption, are held together by a decade of real relationship. And personal trust in high-stakes combat is what separates a formation that executes under pressure from one that fractures. You saw it against the Gold and Silver brothers, Kinkaku and Ginkaku, who had absorbed the chakra of the Nine Tails itself, and Ino Shikacho handled it. Ino's technique created the opening, Shikamaru's strategy shaped the moment, Choji's power executed it, and the Gold and Silver brothers were sealed inside the Kohaku no Johei, the amber purifying pot. Then there was reanimated Asuma. Ino held her position. She locked Asuma in place. She did what the moment required, even though the moment was devastating. This is not a support role. That is the spine of the team showing up exactly when the team needed a spine. Shikamaru is the mind of Team 10. Choji is the body of Team 10. Ino is the reason those two things stayed connected long enough to become what they became.
イノ、俺とこの戦場にいる全ての忍びをつなげてくれ。
Now we get to the part of the argument that I think closes the case permanently. What does Ino Yamanaka actually do when everything is on the line? The answer to that question is what separates a good shinobi from an essential one, and it starts with the worst moment of Ino's life. Inoichi Yamanaka, Ino's father, the head of the Yamanaka clan, one of the most critical sensory operatives in the entire allied shinobi forces, dies during the war. Ino absorbs his role. She steps into the function her father failed, and she maintains the Yamanaka communication network at the precise moment the alliance needs it most. In a war operating at the scale the fourth great ninja war operates at, hundreds of thousands of shinobi, and an enemy in Obito and Madara, real-time communication is not a tactical advantage, it's a survival requirement. Without that network, the allied shinobi forces are not fighting blind. When Naruto Uzumaki makes contact with the chakra of every tailed beast during the war, he begins to feel the emotional weight of every person around him. He needs to reach every shinobi on that battlefield simultaneously and give them something to fight for. Ino opens through the channel. Through her mind transmission technique, she creates the bridge that allows Naruto's feelings, his actual emotional experience, to reach every allied shinobi simultaneously. There are multiple points in the war where the logical conclusion is that this cannot be won. What keeps people fighting anyway is the moment Ino transmits. That is not a support contribution, that is a psychological turning point of the entire conflict delivered through one shinobi's ability and one shinobi's decision to use it at exactly the right moment. So let's map what Ino actually does across the fourth great shinobi war. She maintains the communication infrastructure of the entire alliance after her father dies mid-conflict. She operates as the primary sensory relay across multiple fronts. She contributes to the sealing of Kinkaku and Ginkaku, two of the most dangerous opponents the alliance faces in the early stage of the war. She holds her position against reanimated Asuma in one of the most psychologically devastating fights of the Konoha 11 is asked to endure, and she delivers the single transmission that gives the entire alliance the will to keep fighting at its most critical moment. That is a resume. That is not a supporting role. That is a shinobi who shows up at every level the war asks of her, tactically, operationally, and emotionally. At scale of the entire conflict, she delivers every single time. And yet somehow she is still the one people skip when they talk about who mattered in the war. The genius gets the credit, the powerhouse gets the credit, the Jinchuriki gets the credit, and Ino, the one person who kept the alliance nervous system alive, who held the team together when it mattered most, who opened the channel that allowed hope to travel across the entire battlefield, Ino gets called mid. And that is exactly the kind of erasure that happens when we decide before we start watching that certain characters don't matter. When we look at a female character in a shonen series and assign her a role before she's had the chance to show us who she actually is. We decided Ino was the vain one, the rivalry character, the girl who likes Sasuke, and we never really looked past it. But the record doesn't lie. The contributions are there. The impact is documented across across hundreds of episodes and one of the most consequential conflicts in the entire series. Ino Yamanaka is not a background character who occasionally had useful jutsu. She's a shinobi whose unique abilities, whose emotional leadership, and whose willingness to carry the weight no one else will carry make her one of the most quietly essential figures the Hidden Leaf ever produced. But that's what I think. If you think differently, let me know down in the comments, or even if you think the same, let me know down in the comments. Once again, my name is AOI-KUN, and this was my synopsis.